Hello and welcome back to another episode of You Want to Do What. Today I've got Guy Littlejohn on. He's the founder and principal consultant at Facets. Hi, Guy.
Hi, how you doing, Dan?
All good, mate. All good.
Good.
Shall we jump straight into this? And do you want to tell
Mm,
everyone a bit about what you do?
yes, absolutely. So I am a founder of a commercial consultancy called Facets. I started the business in April 2020, and essentially we partner with boutique tech, creative, marketing, and digital facing firms and help them grow. So I suppose that might be a wordy way of saying we're a growth consultancy.
I mean, I love the idea. We spoke a bit before, about when you
Mm,
agreed to come on the podcast. It's a brilliant idea. And it's so needed, isn't it? A lot of these companies, it's hard to put the right resources in the right places. But how did this all sort of come about? Why did this sort of start for you?
yeah, no, appreciate that. I've always been in sales. So I started my career after leaving university in 2012, worked my way up. Sales, in my opinion, is only part of the commercial function. So you've got marketing is another key part, partnerships, and then client development would be the fourth pillar, in my opinion, of sitting under the commercial umbrella. Um, Worked with a number of different MDs, founders, consultants. I've always been fascinated by consultancy and how it works, and um, luckily managed to keep progressing, keep hitting targets, and keep driving revenue for the businesses that I was working at full time. And as I got more and more senior, I obviously had to start building my own teams out or planning my own growth strategies, and ultimately reporting into the founder. Um, and I suppose this is a roundabout way of saying that this is where the idea of facets really came to me. It was about 5 years ago. So when I was hiring, I was trying to scale the business that I was, the main commercial lead for. I could hire full time and a junior somewhere in the middle, or obviously senior, somebody like myself. That all of them come with positives and negatives. Of having somebody on the payroll, which again we can talk about later. I would work with an intermediary, so like a lead gen business or an agency that would sit externally to my company and do a job for me, essentially help me grow in whichever way their product or service did that. Or I could work with, again, using that word, the traditional consultants. But I always found that I wasn't 100% sure. I was fascinated with what they did. I wasn't 100% sure outside of passing lots of experience over to me. And, because quite often consultants are, 20, 25 years in the business, in the industry, right? So that's why you use consultants traditionally. And whilst they brought something to the table, I always again felt that it wasn't quite enough. So those three options to hiring or to scaling, any business, I just felt there must be something a bit different. And then as I continued to progress through my career and sell to different, I suppose, teams and different structures and different industries and different verticals within those industries, I thought the idea of facets really started to form. And essentially, it's a hybrid of all three, where we try and pick the best bits out of that full-time hire, the intermediary, and the traditional consultant, and work part-time with all of our clients, but actually delivering work, so delivering revenue and strategy. So we cut out all of the tea and cakes meetings, the internal meetings that everybody's been on that they don't feel that they need to go to. And we just focus on revenue generating operations, whether that be through marketing, through sales, through partnerships, through client development. And hopefully, well, fingers crossed, we continue to have the success that we've had so far.
It's really interesting. I do a bit of SME consulting for a few different businesses, and
Yeah, yeah.
the reason I love it is because it's different every day, and also the ability to actually have an impact and help to grow a business is it's so much fun. And if you're kind of entrepreneurial,
Yeah.
that's a massive attraction to
Yeah.
going into consultancy. But for you, why do you love consultancy?
Well, similar to that, and you know, I mentioned previously I was always fascinated with consultants, and I think I was really fascinated um, by the fact that they were working with multiple businesses week in, week out, sometimes day in, day out. They'd dip into one thing and they'd be running a certain project, and then they dip into something else after lunch. You know, and that to me, and potentially I was just a little bit, you know, my brain or the way that I'm wired wasn't fixed to just working with one business, you know, 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And I think that it was almost a fascination, to be honest, in consultants, and maybe even a jealousy. You know, that just looks so interesting, and it's exactly like you said. You know, we now, as a company, we work with over 24 businesses. I don't work with all of them. I got the principal consultant, so I work with a small number of our clients, but they are all very interesting. And like you said, it would be a privilege to help them grow. And there's such an amazing responsibility that I feel, and I know everybody at Facets feels, and there's I think there's 13 or 14 of us now.
Wow.
We all feel that responsibility day in, day out. And if you get the right founder with the right business, with the right product, and they allow you to take them on a journey based on your experience, because we've all done it before. We've all worked with very similar businesses to them before. You know, it can be a match made in heaven, because otherwise, you know, with their budget of these boutique companies, they can't really afford, you know, senior sales guys and girls, or senior marketing guys and girls, or commercial directors on, you know, 80, 90, 100 grand a year. So we say, well, we don't actually think you need that. You just need it 1 or 2 days a week, and therefore it hits right in their budget. So that's the idea behind it.
I mean, I wish people at schools and universities would talk about consulting more, because going back to a point that you said, which really sort of hit home for me, is where you get to dip in and dip out. So I don't know about you, but always at school, I'd become sort of hyper focused on one thing for like a few weeks, a few months.
Absolutely.
But then I'd want to change, and it could be something completely different and have no, you know, connection to what it was previously focused on. But I think there's quite a few people that, as you go through school, if you're like that, you tend to struggle in school a bit, because you're not rewarded for chopping and changing. But I actually think it's a strength. I don't know how you feel about it.
Well, I completely agree, and part of our interview process, Dan, is you know, can you show us, or can you sort of relay an experience where you've had to spin multiple plates? And that's a bit of a cheesy way of saying, you know, where you've had to manage multiple workflows, multiple pipelines, multiple projects all at once, whether that be for the same business or without, because it definitely takes a certain type of mindset. But I've always, you know, you talked about school then, it's really interesting. I spoke to somebody about this last week, and because they said, what's it like? And I said, well, you know, when you were at school and you went in the morning, and then you had a chat with your mates, and then you were in, you know, like roll call, or I've forgotten what we called it. My school,
Registration.
That's it. Yeah. And you'd have a chat, and then you're doing something there. Whatever you're doing, you're adapting to the day. You're kicking off your day. You're saying hello and all that type of thing. Then you're in maths. Then you're in English. Then you're in French. Then you have lunch, and then you have science, and then you maybe have an arts class, and that is what keeps you focused and excited, bite-sized chunks. But then when you leave school, you're told to go and do maths full time.
Yes.
Or science full time, or English full time.
Yes.
And I don't, yes, I do, let's say, sales full time or commercial activity full time, but it's for loads of different types of companies and different businesses who don't compete with each other. So therefore, I almost feel like I'm a little bit back at school, because I'm dipping in and out of all those different little taster classes and lessons. So it's interesting you mentioned school there, because actually I was chatting to somebody about that last week. I just feel a little bit like I'm back at school with, some like-minded founders, and a great team around me. And, we're sort of, maybe we've got to the stage now, even though we're only a couple of years in, where we picked our GCSEs, and eventually I'm quite fortunate because I've already picked my A levels, if you like. So I've already picked the 2 or 3 clients that I want to work with. But, that's how everybody feels, is that no one day is the same. And I agree with you. I think there's a big stigma behind being essentially, obviously we're a limited company, but essentially you could say that, you've got to start off as a freelancer. There's a huge stigma behind that. And I think it's a negative one. And it's even, it's truly rewarding, I think, if you can get it right. And I think times are changing. And previously, as I mentioned, those consultants were 20, 25, 30 years in their career. I don't think if you can niche down on something that you enjoy doing and you do very, very well, and you can take a little bit of the Facets model and say, well, I can apply that part-time to this business and part-time to that business and part-time to this business. I suppose you kind of fall into consulting without even sort of branding it as that.
100%. And, I what you said about being asked to go and essentially once you leave school, do science all day, that massively hits home for me. And this is something that I just wish more people would talk about, because especially for people of sort of my generation, I've spoken to a lot on this podcast, and they said they really struggled when they went into sort of maybe a corporate environment. And I struggled. I worked in the city for 5 years as an insurance broker in London, and it was good fun, right? But I struggled to do the same thing every day and do the same process every day and I just think I wish people would talk about this more and say, actually, guys, the world's changing, and you can go and do a bit of freelancing, and you can go and, dip your toes in here, like use your early 20s to go and try different things. And that's why I always say to people, and I don't know if you agree, I personally don't see university as the best way to spend your early 20s anymore. No, I think you should go and try stuff. How do you feel about
that? I agree. So again, it's funny. I was having a conversation with somebody about this last week. I personally wouldn't go to university again if I went back now. But I'm not a doctor or a dentist or an architect or something like that. Whilst I'm very, very proud of my profession, you can have some basic fundamental skills and have some basic boxes that your brain needs to tick every day or every week to work in a commercial role, whether that be, marketing or whether that be sort of, a sales role. It's very interesting because university was a fabulous experience, and I'd almost say go just for the experience. It's the first time you're away from the folks, or depending on what school you went to, if you boarded, or you're out in the big wide world. The reins are off, so to speak. So that's an experience by itself with no pressure. Right. So with 8 to 24 hours of work a week, I mean, it's, you can do that fairly easily. I personally wouldn't go again. But if somehow, maybe we can come up with a business that allows us to do it, Dan, but if somehow you could box that experience that I got from Newcastle in the 4 years that I was there and put it all together, because I learned an awful lot, I think that has seen me communicate with people the way I communicate now. A lot of that's back from school as well, but through uni, and experience different things, absolutely. But if somehow we could box up the uni experience without going through the methodical and outdated curriculum, I think that is probably there, then and apply it a little bit more to real life, then I think we're possibly onto a winner.
And I 100% agree. I mean, we've kind of touched on it here as well, but do you think consulting is going through a bit of a change? The old sort of formulas of it was always seen as a very expensive add-on to your business, wasn't it? But now I think there's so many people with so many different skill sets that it really is creating this new environment for like new age consultancies, isn't it?
Yeah,
You can be in any different field and have a consultancy and go into a business and help it grow. Do you think the industry is changing?
I do. We use it when we talk to businesses that we meet for the first or second time now. Again, fear of repeating myself, that word traditional consultant, I think is maybe a way to answer this question as well. Traditionally, consultants are a long time in their career, maybe towards the end of their career. So they've worked for 2 or 3 businesses, for 30 years, and they charge an awful lot of money. It doesn't have to be expensive. Our target audience isn't, large businesses with, dozens of people within their commercial team. It is typically businesses that don't have a commercial function, and they've grown to the stage that they're at through referrals or word of mouth, or the founder just being, good at opening 2 or 3 doors and then closing a couple of them as well. We definitely class ourselves as a non-traditional consultancy for a number of reasons. One, I'm 10 years into a career. I rose very quickly, and everybody in Facets rose very, very quickly through their sort of traditional careers, if you like. By traditional, I mean, working for one business full time, and obviously the guys work for Facets full time, but then indirectly work for multiple companies through the model. It's a interesting sector, and I still think there's a little bit of stigma that I'm trying to break down slowly. I mean, people say, "Oh, well, you're going to be £1,000 a day, and what do you actually do?" Because we've worked with consultants before. We've worked with consultants before, and they paint a lot of pretty pictures, and they say a lot of sort of wanky words, but they don't actually get on the tools and do anything. And then you're like, well, you just start with us, and you know what, and I'll show you what we do and how we do it. So we've got to break that down a little bit, which is tough, really, really tough. And but again, going back to that point, that if you can price yourself effectively, and you can provide a business or a person or a group of people something that they don't have internally, that's really important, then naturally you fall into the consulting world anyway, because once you've got one business that you solve a problem for, you can easily find lookalikes. And then all of a sudden you're working for 5 businesses 1 day a week and juggling multiple plates and dipping in and out as the project or whatever you're delivering sees fit, whether it's operationally or commercially. Then I think there's room for that part-time model everywhere. And people say to me, "Oh God, you set your business up right at the beginning of lockdown." And I said, I set it up because of lockdown. As cold-hearted as that sounds, Dan, lockdown came and the coronavirus came at early 2020, and I thought, now's the time to do it. Now is because companies will want direction, they'll want experience. Unfortunately, they'll be cutting costs. They'll have a careful eye on all of those things, and up against those 3 available channels, hiring full time, using a traditional intermediary or a traditional consultant, if you like, Facet stacks up pretty well against those, and now even more so than previously. So we're trying to push and change the stigma of consultants and part-time work as well. I think maybe going off on a slight tangent here, but hopefully keeping it relevant, is that that's something else as well, that part-time has always got this slight stigma against it, because it's as if you're not doing something that should be whole. Does that make sense?
I 100% get that. Yes.
Yeah. What happens, what we try and say is, actually, that whole should never have been as whole as it was, if that makes sense as well. Maybe, you don't actually need somebody to do that 5 days a week.
Do you know where I think this comes from? And I 100% agree with what you're saying. There's this really old-fashioned, like draconian attitude towards people's work. Now, if you go back before COVID, if you weren't in the office 5 days a week, if you wanted to get anywhere, you had to be in an hour early and stay an hour late, right? Which is just bullshit, because most people were sitting there reading the Daily Mail or something. Like, it's just absolute bullshit. But there was this like, oh, well, you can't have worked really hard because, that only took you 2 hours. Well, why am I being penalized for it only taking me 2 hours? But actually, I've probably done a whole day's work in those 2 hours. Like, I've done the task. Right, move on. You don't need me tomorrow because I've done it. It was just this whole attitude towards this. You must be there kind of thing.
No, absolutely. And what happens if, as well, on agreeing with that, but at the same time, if you are that person that was in the office at 7 a.m. and leaving at 7, what you've done in 3 days far outweighs your colleague who came in at 9:30 and rolled out at 4:30.
Yeah.
Oh, well, depending, task dependent, but and it is about focusing on value or output, not time. But if you cut out a lot of the, I think I said at the beginning, the tea and cakes meetings, or you don't go to that fluffy event that your boss has asked you to go to halfway. I'm speaking from experience, travel halfway across London on the tube in 30-degree heat and attend this event by yourself when you're 23 years old, when you don't really know the industry and sector. If he'd have just got somebody to come in and train me how to write a cold email, I'd have been much more effective in that day. And I had to learn from trial and error how to do that myself. But it's interesting because we say that a lot of, actually doing something part-time doesn't mean that you're not doing the whole, I suppose, outcome of that project or that individual channel that you're working on. It might take you a little bit more time, but again, that's something that I look for in the team here, is working effectively. So you're working smart and hard, but if you had to choose one, you're working smart, not hard. If that makes sense. So you're being highly effective as quickly as possible. What is going to get me to that end result as quickly as I possibly can? And our debate consistently is somebody like me, or probably somebody like yourself, doing it part-time is going to get you there a lot quicker than somebody for your budget that you can hire full-time.
Yes, exactly.
If we're 1 day a week and they're 5 days a week, I still believe that we'll be able to do that because we work so effectively.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with you. Personality trait wise, I think we've alluded to a few here, but let's kind of put it down the board. To be a consultant, what's probably the top 3 personality traits somebody needs to have?
Resilience, I think. These are all going to be a bit cheesy. Has anybody ever answered these and not been cheesy with it?
Absolutely not. We're 200 episodes in.
Yeah. I think resilience. I think if there was a single word that could describe that ability to spin plates, that I described it to somebody the other day, and it is 2 words, unfortunately, but mental gymnastics.
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can do mental gymnastics consistently, and you can dip in of one thing and you're doing one project and Slack and WhatsApp are going off, and then you're happy to get a call from somebody else and take it because you know that will add value. And I think that's important. Or maybe that's just me. Because sort of definitely like being pushed and then cracking back on with things after answering whichever sort of call or email comes in, if it's obviously an important one from a client. And again, apologies, it is a bit cheesy, but I think if you're a consultant setting up on your own, and whether you're just setting up and as a sort of a sole trader, or you're going to set up a limited, there's that sort of burnout culture, but you have to work hard. There is absolutely no way that you can just dip in and do, rock in at whenever it suits you at 10 and check out at 2. I wish you could. And I'm sure that there are some people who are much, much brighter than me that would be able to do that. But I've loved it, but I've never worked like I've worked in the last 2 years. And and you, in my opinion, you have to, like we were saying before, work smart, but you have to, particularly if you want to scale a business or scale a consultancy, there's a big difference, in my opinion, between, and this is sort of continuing on, so I've kind of half answered your question, I think, and then continued on.
But all good.
I think there's a big difference between scaling a business and being a consultant. So it depends which one you want to do. If you want 5 clients, 5 days a week, for example, and then when one client dips out, because they will, you could do a brilliant job, and then it's really your conversational skills or your personality as to why they wouldn't hire in-house if they're that way inclined. That hasn't happened to us yet, but we've been able to manage that and understand where we can add value outside of what we've already done that could be replaced. And it's the way that mindset is needed to either be able to let that client go, and then you've got to go into overdrive to supplement your earnings and find another client, or do you want to scale a business? And if you want to scale a business, then you have to be head of sales, head of marketing, head of partnerships. You have to be head of delivery, head of recruitment, head of everything, because you cannot do whilst delivering for clients 9 to 5.
Yeah, 100%.
So it depends what you want to do.
I was going to say as well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said work hard, but we talk about burnout a lot these days, but for me and the way my personality works, I have to be busy and I enjoy being busy, but I think why I don't get burnout as quickly is because I'm doing different things. Now, if I was working intensely hard on one specific thing, I think my brain would be like, no, we're not doing this thing. But different things I can work really hard at and just change, 1 hour do this, next hour do that. And I think that's a really important point. If you're not that way inclined and you love going down into super, super detail and doing something all day, every day, don't do consultancy.
No, I agree. And people that join the business consistently say, I cannot believe it's Thursday already. Or I can't believe it's Wednesday. I can't believe it's Friday afternoon. I got to today and I thought, shit, it's 2:15. And it just flew by. And that happens nearly every day, Dan. And it's just consistent and it's relentless. And my fiance, she's like, you working this weekend? Well, if you've scaled it doesn't feel like work. Like you were saying, I always have to be consistently busy. But, if a founder of a business who's as passionate about his business as I am about mine pops me a little LinkedIn message on Saturday afternoon, if it pings through and I think, you know what, I've got some time here, I can respond to this, for example, I'm going to do it. You're never off the clock, I think.
That's it.
But that's because you love it. And I think the earning potential as a consultant, either straight out of school, straight out of uni, far outweighs the PAYE earning potential if you get it right. Far outweighs. I mean, look, there's some bits that you'd have to navigate for the first couple of years, as you got your first couple of years earnings behind you, which are unfortunate. Again, we could go into that, but I think that should change, because I think that probably puts some people off consulting. You can be 20 grand straight out of school and you need 3 months paychecks to get a mortgage. Whereas if you're consulting, you want 2 years where you could be earning 20 grand a month consulting and they still want 2 years pay. It's a strange way to. Business owner is penalized more than the employee, which I don't. That's maybe a conversation for another time. But
it's an odd one.
Yeah, it is. But multiple plates, multiple clients is certainly exciting, and it's that responsibility. Going back to your point right at the beginning, the responsibility of helping these businesses, because again, sort of leaning on a point that I had, if you find a niche and you do something that business doesn't do internally already, then you're of high value. And it's just continuing to consistently add value. And then what Facets have done, or what we've done, is we set off in one division, and we've now got three, and we've sort of spread out in amongst our clients, because I could see that they needed all of these three areas to help them grow. And but yeah, if you like getting into the weeds for days and days and days on projects or whatever it is that you're doing, then yeah, consulting is probably not for you. It's probably you've got more time when you're a full-time employee. You'll have a manager, and he'll say, we need this doing by X, and and you've got that time to dedicate to it. When you're a consultant, it's quick thinking, on the fly, right? We want to do this, and this is how I'm going to do it, and you've got to, if you set a deadline as well, you've got to meet that deadline. So then quite often, again, going back to what we were talking before about, hours and things, but if a couple of new business calls come in, you'll take those, but that might push your deadline back if you just work traditional hours. So therefore you've got to get up at 6 and do that couple of hours before, you've actually got to deliver it. So it's exciting. I think that's probably an easy word to use.
Do you find you're more productive being a consultant versus if you've ever worked in PAYE? Because it's certainly the case for me. When I was given, tasks and deadlines to do, it almost put me off. I don't know. I think my brain is a bit odd in that. But doing it myself and sort of, it's quite exciting because I'm going to achieve doing this. It makes me do it more. I think I'm not a very good employee versus I'm better being a consultant. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think through my 20s, I was, really disheartened. What I've now worked out, Dan, is working for other people, and not having that flexibility. I've now, over the last 2 years, realized that. But I think it was and quite often inane, pointless, finger in the air.
Yes.
Do this at this time, and you're like, but that doesn't need to be done now.
And you question it, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then you get a bollocking, and then you're like, well, and then then you're on the back foot, then you're worried about that, and then and then and it can be a vicious cycle sometimes, being sort of PAYE. But for me personally, having the freedom to I suppose pick the projects you want to pick. I'm just looking at a board that I have behind me, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, about 11 points on the to-do list. They're all important, but they all have different levels of importance.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a little green dot next to 4 of them. 2 big value that I had to get done sort of today. And the other 2, just because they're both really fun. I wanted to do them.
Yeah.
But they would also be big value. And then I've obviously, like I said, had the busy day where I sort of picked my head up, and it was sort of mid-afternoon. But you've got to do things in a timely manner. But I suppose you're the master of your own destiny with consulting a little bit. Yes, you've got to do a job, but you choose when you want to do it. If you want to do it at 6 a.m. or want to do it at 8 p.m. or if you want to do it on a Sunday, doesn't really matter as long as the work gets done and delivered. Because with tech now, depending on what the role is, of course, but with tech now, you can do things at one time zone and set it to deliver the work at a different time zone. And, so really you've got 24 hours a day. You need how many sleeping, depending on who you are?
Yeah.
I don't know, 4 to 10 or something like that, depending on who you are. And I think it's flexibility. It's flexibility. I think there's value in joining a PAYE company and learning from people.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely see value in that. But I think if you want to manage your own diary, essentially, and you are that type of person, and even though you're young, you know yourself well enough to know that, which I didn't, then consulting's, definitely for you. And if somebody can come up with a better word than consulting, I'll buy that off them as well.
I usually ask, what's the biggest positive for you, having worked in this industry? But would that be it? The ability to control your own diary and the flexibility, is that the positive for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And working with multiple businesses and learning from them as well.
And on the flip side of that, what's something that's maybe a negative or less favorable about working in consultancy?
This might scare a few people off. I think you've got to be, you are not first priority on the payroll. I think it's maybe something that you've got to think about. So therefore, to counteract that, I suppose a problem and then a solution for you, bill up front and don't do any work until you've actually been paid. Yep. That's what we've started to do. But when I first started the business, I didn't, and we had businesses, 2 or 3 months later paying us. Outside of that, I don't think I could think of too many negatives or any other negatives. I might flip back round to it if something comes to me, but freedom's everything. Options is everything. People talk about money can't buy you happiness, and I agree with that. But what money does give you is options, and what consulting gives you, aside from the potential money, is options. And I think that's all we all want all the time. Is options to make our own choices. And you've got that with consulting. And
what would be your number one piece of advice to anyone listening to this and thinking, do you know what, I really would quite like to get into that?
Find out what you're good at, or take that back a step. Find out what you love doing. What do you love doing all the time? I've recently watched that. I don't know whether you've seen it on Apple TV. We Crashed.
No, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, no, really good about the rise and fall of WeWork.
Okay.
But he set WeWork up because of a fond memory that he had of his childhood about community and collaboration and people all being together after trying to set up multiple businesses before. It's well worth a watch for anybody. So find something that you love, and hopefully you're good at that as well. And then find some businesses that need what you love and what you're good at, and go and speak to them.
No, great advice. And to wrap this up, would you still go into this industry knowing everything you know now?
100%. And if I could have done, so if I felt I had the experience and I could give something to somebody and I could articulate what I wanted to do and how to the people who were going to buy my product, because essentially people bought me to start with, of course, they now buy a business and a function. If I could have done that, or I could guarantee I'd do that, then yes, I'd certainly do it again. But there's no harm in, dipping your toe in the water, learning your craft somewhere with the goal of getting into consulting, a couple of years down the line. But yeah, definitely get into consulting if you've got the opportunity.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Guy. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. And where can people find you and find Facets?
Yeah, so LinkedIn's the best. I'm off all social media apart from LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is the best for me. So Guy Littlejohn, quite an easy name to find and remember. And then the website, you can click through from LinkedIn, but it's Facets CC, which stands for facetscommercialconsulting.com.
Brilliant. Thanks again, Guy.
Appreciate it. Cheers, Dan.